A catalog 490 pages thick lies open on a kitchen table in Minnesota, winter of 1968. A coffee cup holding down one corner. Herter's out of Waseca, the biggest mail-order sporting goods house in America. On one page, a revolver built for Herter's in West Germany, listed in one auction record at $47. 2 days on a factory floor. 2 days of a man's life, delivered to his mailbox. And everyone will tell you one law in Washington ended it in a single afternoon in 1968. The catalogs say otherwise. The biggest one Herter's ever printed came out 5 years after that law. The company kept publishing for 13 more. And the thing that actually took it apart was never in Washington at all. What ended in Waseca wasn't a right, it was a voice. Calling it a catalog undersells it. The 1962 and 1963 editions run about 490 pages apiece, going by the copies that turn up in dealers' hands today. Herter's numbered them like editions of a book. Number 76 was 1966. Number 80 was 1970. One account puts the print runs at 400,000 to 500,000 copies a year, and one man wrote nearly all of it. George Leonard Herter took over his family's store in Waseca, a farm town in southern Minnesota, the business going back to 1893 by most accounts, and in 1937 turned it into a mail-order house. Then he sat down and wrote the descriptions himself, every item, every year. A fishing plug in the 1970 book came with the claim that fish could hear it from over 160 feet away and would come at it fighting mad. Men read lines like that out loud at the supper table and laughed at them. Then they ordered the plug. That was what arrived once a year. 490 pages of one stubborn man's opinions, bound like a phone book, sent for nothing. And somewhere in the middle of it, the guns. Herter sold rifles, shotguns, reloading gear, and its own line of single-action revolvers. Those revolvers weren't made in Minnesota. They were built in West Germany by J.P. Sauer and Son and shipped in with the Herter's name on the barrel, chambered in one case for a cartridge that existed nowhere else on Earth, the 401 Herter's Power Mag. That's where the number gets real. One auction record lists that revolver at $47 in 1968. A production worker in American manufacturing that year averaged $2.89 an hour and $117.62 for the week before anything came out of it. So $47 was about 16 hours of work, 2 full days on the floor, roughly 2/5 of a week's gross pay. Run it forward on the Consumer Price Index and it lands near $450 today. But the paycheck version is the one that meant something at the time. Picture the counter of a rural post office on a Tuesday morning. A wooden crate up on the scale, a man signing for it, carrying it out to the truck, driving home with a revolver he had never held and had bought off a page. Here's where most people get this wrong, and it isn't about whether the law mattered. It mattered. It mattered twice. Under United States federal law, the Gun Control Act of 1968 ended that scene at the post office counter, and the same act tightened restrictions on importing handguns, which reached directly into the German-built line Herter's had made its own. 2 hits, same year, on the exact business the company had been running for 3 decades. If that killed Herter's, somebody forgot to tell Herter's. I'll get to what actually took this company apart, because it happened almost a decade later and 400 miles from any Capitol building. Stay with me. The record on this one is stranger than the story people tell about it. The law itself is worth getting right, because it usually gets compressed into a single dramatic afternoon, and that isn't what happened. Mail-order handguns went before anything else. Title IV of the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act was signed on June 19, 1968. 4 months later, on October 22nd, the Gun Control Act superseded it before it had even taken effect and widened the ban to rifles, shotguns, and ammunition. Signing it, President Johnson said it stopped murder by mail order. Then nothing happened for 8 more weeks. The provisions took effect on December 16, 1968. All of this is United States federal law. If you're watching from Canada or Britain or Australia, your own timeline looks nothing like this one. which means a man could fill out a Herter's order form the week of Thanksgiving 1968, fold a money order inside it, and have it filled legally. The same form, the same money order mailed 3 weeks later was against the law. Nobody rang a bell. Nobody put up a sign. So what showed up in American mailboxes in 1970? The catalog, and it kept getting fatter. Number 80 came out in 1970, 2 years after the ban. Number 83 covered August 1972 through August 1973. And the edition running from August 1973 to August 1974, the surviving copies dealers describe today run to 694 pages, plus a supplement. 694 pages, 5 years after the law that supposedly ended the company. 200 pages thicker than the book a father might have had on the table in 1963. Set those two side by side. The 1963 edition and the 1973 edition on the same kitchen table under the same lamp. The later one is the heavier book by a wide margin. That is not the artifact of a business killed in an afternoon. By most accounts, the catalog peaked at well over 650 pages, and George Herter was still writing the descriptions himself. No press release, no farewell edition. Whatever was going wrong in Waseca wasn't coming out of Washington. Herter's had stores. That's the part that gets left out. Waseca and Glenwood in Minnesota, Mitchell, South Dakota, Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, Iowa City and Iowa Falls, Olympia, Washington. A mail-order house from a farm town had put buildings on the ground across 5 states, and it did it just as the 1970s arrived with fuel prices that made every one of those buildings more expensive to stock, to supply, and to heat. Doug Lodermeyer, a Twin Cities collector who has spent years documenting the company, describes it as a perfect storm, and the overexpansion is what he puts at the front of it. The 1968 law comes after. And then something almost nobody thinks about: federal bans on importing certain feather species. Herter's was one of the largest importers of fly-tying material in the country. A rule written about birds took a piece out of a Minnesota company's inventory. Picture a store in Beaver Dam on a Tuesday in February. Shelves full, aisles empty, lights on all day for 11 customers. Meanwhile, 400 miles southwest, a smaller outfit was doing nothing but mail order. And growing. Cabela's started in 1961 out of a Nebraska kitchen, selling fishing flies through a magazine ad. In 1968, the same year the mail order ban passed, the family moved into an abandoned John Deere dealership in Sidney, Nebraska, and used the ground floor only. Upstairs, they put in an archery range for the employees. Through the 1970s, the range came out. Then the next floor filled. Then the next, until the whole building was warehouse. That was catalog business. Only catalog business. Cabela's did not open a destination retail store until 1987. Sit with that for a second. The decade that supposedly proved mail order was finished is the decade one mail order company spent eating its own building floor by floor. If a federal law had ended catalogs, nobody sent Nebraska the memo. Herter's went the other way. It had invented the model, the thick book, the house brand, the store that carried everything, and then walked away from it into brick and mortar at precisely the wrong moment. One of these two companies was going to end up owning the other one's name. The end was ordinary, which is somehow worse. Herter's Incorporated filed for bankruptcy in 1981 with millions of dollars in debt and orders it could not fill. That's the date in the New York Times account of the company published in 2008. The record isn't perfectly clean. At least one Minnesota newspaper retrospective puts the collapse in 1977 instead. What nobody disputes is the shape of it. The money ran out in Waseca, the assets went into liquidation, and Cabela's came out the other side holding the name. There's a detail in that town that stays with you. The printer down the road that had grown up producing his catalog, Brown Printing, had become one of the largest commercial printers in the country on the back of that one book. The catalog built a whole second business. Then it stopped arriving. George Herter lived until 1994. He was 83. By then, a generation of men who had learned half of what they knew from his descriptions were middle-aged, telling their kids about a book that didn't come anymore. Almost none of it, though, is actually gone. Mail order never died. Under American federal law, a rifle bought from a seller 1,000 miles away still ships. It just goes to a licensed dealer's counter now instead of a front porch. Ammunition by mail came all the way back on May 19, 1986, under the Firearm Owners Protection Act. And the Herter's name is on shelves this afternoon. Ammunition, decoys, waiters, sitting inside Cabela's and Bass Pro stores that exist at all because a man in Waseca showed everybody how it was done. What didn't survive was the writing. Nobody replaced 490 pages of one crank telling you in complete seriousness what a fish can hear, though you can still get the book. Go Looking Tonight in a 1970 Herter's number 80 runs about $15, less than a box of shells. It arrives in a padded envelope instead of once a year. Set it open on the kitchen table with a cup on the corner, and it is the same object it was in 1968. Did your father have one? If you know the year, or if it's still somewhere in the house, tell me in the comments. I read them. And subscribe if you want to keep going, because there are more of these books and more of these companies than anybody ever bothered to write down.